Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Straight On Till Morning. The Lost Girls. Luna chose that moment to burst onto the scene. She had found one of the secret doors to the hideout almost immediately and scrambled down, much more elegantly than Wendy. She barked happily, pleased with her interest and audience. Wow, a wolf, Cubby said in awe. He's so fierce, Skipper sighed. She's mine, Wendy said proudly, going to pet her, and I'm hers. That's incredible. She's beautiful, Slyly said, a little more jealous than impressed. As she ran her hands over the wolf's coat, Wendy saw with dismay it was covered in burrs and mud. Luna panted, a little laboriously, leaned extra hard against her human friend. It was obvious she was exhausted. Still part puppy, she was too young to realize she had worn herself out. Honestly, Wendy was feeling a little done in as well. Flying was hard work, and so was being kidnapped by pirates. Poor girl. Well, if we must go alone, she said, a little peevishly. She couldn't help it. I think we require a little bit of rest and refreshment here first. The fairy looked outraged and put her hands on her hips. She made a very obvious walking motion with two of her fingers and pointed to the door. No, we have to keep going. I'm sorry, you might use most of your day on wing, Wendy said politely. But while it's glorious sport, like something out of a dream, well, unlike a dream, it's a bit exhausting, like all sports really. Luna had to run here on foot. She's had it. The fairy frowned at Luna and then tossed her head, like she was saying, Fine, all right, but only for your wolf, not for you. You heard her, boys. It's tea time, Slightly cried. It's sort of a reverse Snow White story. The boys ran around grabbing what provisions they could, like the dwarfs, desperately making nice for their lady guest. The twins quickly filled a basket with berries and fruit. Cubby found a big bowl of nuts. Slightly blew embers into a lovely little fire and put the kettle on. Where they got the kettle, a highly decorated affair of blue and gold enamel, was a mystery. Toodle somehow managed to carry and set out a mismatched cups, woods, bone, china, and coconut shell. Skipper brought out a bowl of golden comb honey. While this happy chaos was happening, Wendy took the opportunity to approach the fairy alone, and very slightly quiet part of the hideout. Tinkerbell, she ventured, so that's your name? The fairy looked at her in surprise and grudgingly nodded her head. Do you really keep Peter from going to London on purpose? Tinkerbell looked away, but she didn't disagree. Wendy was torn. More than anything, she wanted this beautiful little fairy to be her friend, to like her back, to initiate her in the secret world of flowers and fae folk. But she had to know the truth. Do you really do it because you were jealous of me? Tinkerbell crossed her arms and scowled at her. She jingled something disdainful. Of me? Wendy repeated, indicating her own dress, her size, her brown hair, her overall very unfairy-like lady plainness. Tinkerbell nodded, a little uncertainty. Well, I think that's very flattering. Perhaps even the happiest compliment I've ever been paid, no matter how backhanded. I thank you. The fairy rolled her eyes. Wendy sighed. She sat down heavy on a barrel. If we are being completely honest here, and I feel we should be since we are companions in this strange adventure, then I should tell you straight. I do like Peter Pan. I used to worship him, in fact. I used to dream about him, too. I suppose if he had actually come to me, I might have... Well, who knows? He's all I ever really cared about, really. Besides Mother and Father, and Michael, and John, and Nana, of course. Tinkerbell had an aha look on her face and waggled an accusing finger at the human girl. But I never even saw him while I was awake, Tinkerbell, Wendy pointed out. These thoughts of him are just that. Just in my imagination. I'm very sorry if I upset you to come and listen to my stories. But I was never even aware that you and Peter were there. You have such amazing real adventures with him in Neverland. All I ever had was his shadow. Tinkerbell far more naughty, really, especially when it seems to result in putting all of Neverland in danger. We both have a lot to answer for, apologies and reformations to make together. The fairy looked outraged at the suggestion of any similarity between them. Then she recovered herself, crossing her arms again. Go on, she seemed to say. And look, here we are, talking about Peter while he isn't even here at all, in person or in shadow form. Wendy sort of laughed. Is he really the king of Neverland after all, invading our conversations and making everything about himself even when he's not present? Hook can't stop talking about him. The Lost Boys are depressed about him. You're constantly jealous around him, and I sold him when I couldn't save him. It's ridiculous, really, the effect he has on all our lives. Tinkerbell, the fairy jumped at the sun-directed address. Wendy was looking at her sternly, full of purpose, shoulders back and jaw firm. You and I must resolve not to discuss him any longer, at least until everything else is settled and we have properly saved Neverland. Surely the two of us have other things we could talk about that don't involve a boy. Other things that warrant our attention. Pirates, flying the job of getting his shadow back, beating Captain Hook, the adventures we have, our lives, the life of a fairy, the life of a plain human girl. That should be more than enough for many hours of solid conversation. So enough talk about him for now. Are we agreed? The fairy looked at her as if this was a weird thing to ask. And Wendy supposed it was a bit odd. Wasn't Peter the very reason they were thrown together in the first place? But then, as she thought really wound its way through her mind, the fairy relaxed. She shook her head from side to side, as if sloshing around the idea around physically and measuring it. Finally, she nodded. She put out her tiny hand. Wendy grinned, thrilled to have made some headway with the fairy at last. She very carefully took the tiny hand between her own index finger and thumb and gave it a gentle but solid shake. Excellent. This should make our task much easier, as well as working together. Tinkerbell narrowed her eyes at that. Maybe the idea of actively working together with a human girl, or at least expressing it out loud, was still a bit much. But she didn't jingle or otherwise comment. Whatever their feelings toward each other or Peter were, they had a job to do. The tea was filling but strange. Wendy could have done with some proper sandwiches, pastries, or crackers, and she had to sneak the questionable day-old rabbit meat to Luna, who snapped it up discreetly and happily. But she appreciably drank the strange reddish-brown decoction of leaves and twigs the Lost Boys swore was just like proper tea if you didn't think about it too much. And in truth, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't the East India Company's Darjeeling. It had a warm, almost cinnamony taste. Luna had a big bowl of fresh, cold water, and Toodles insisted on having his tea the same way, on the floor. After that and stale biscuits, plus a little rust, more tummy rubs than any puppy could really ask for from a hideous hideout full of instantly devoted fans, it was finally time to leave. Outside, the air was fresh and embracing as Neverland air ever was. A great day for flying. But while the two girls was getting ready to say their goodbyes, Wendy noticed Skipper kept looking at her strangely, almost in satisfaction. Is there something wrong? Wendy asked. Of course, immediately needed to fix whatever problem there was. Nothing, Skipper said, turning away so she couldn't see his face. Wendy wasn't the girl at parties who caused boys to blush, but she had seen it happen with others, like at the spring when John was caught off guard by a hello from Alice Cotswoldington. He had turned red, turned away, and choked on his punch. This wasn't that. Skipper didn't seem to be blushing exactly. There was little wonder or fear in his eyes. He grew nervous under her scrutiny. Come on, you can tell me, Wendy nodded. Is it that you actually want to join me in Tinkerbell? Looking for Peter Pan, I mean? She tried to keep hope out of her voice. No, he cried. Immediately he looked down and lowered his voice to its usual mumble. I don't want to see Peter Pan right now. Maybe not even after he's finished being angry or whatever. Maybe not ever. His voice. It hit Wendy all at once. Skipper's constant staring at her and his reluctance to speak. The especially baggy clothing he wore and soft, almost babyish face he had despite his height. The obvious desire not to be noticed by the new girl while being able to take his eyes off her. Skipper, you're a girl! Wendy cried. The lost boys turned around at her cry. Skipper swallowed hard and hardened her look, but that was all. Sort of, slightly said with a shrug. What do you mean, sort of? Wendy demanded. She ain't like you, Cubby said. Not like me. She's exactly like me. She doesn't wear, one twin began. Dresses and ribbons, the other one finished. She doesn't talk like you. Her hair's too short. She don't feel like a mother. Yes, but those are all externalities, Wendy. But she and I both have, well, nothing that could be said aloud in mixed company. How old was Skipper? Old enough to be reminded of these things once a month? Skipper's eyes were tortoiseshell, her eyelashes short and black. Wendy found herself imagining the lost boy with long hair and a proper girlish curl down her back, a ribbon around her neck, and simple but fetching strolling flock, and realized it would have been ridiculous. The girl was perfectly at ease and comfortable in her jacket and animal getup. Anything less freeling would have forced her to stand weirdly or made her look like a clown. But how are you a lost boy? Wendy finally asked. Always wanted to be one, Skipper answered, voice strong that she decided to speak. I saw Peter come and take boys away from the orphanage. Only boys. Everyone knew that. Only boys could become lost boys. So I became a boy. The nurses forgot. They hated me. They hated me who I was when I was a girl. They could barely read, so I changed my name in the books. I was a boy. And then Peter Pan came and he took me. Everyone was quiet during her little speech, as if it were natural and acceptable an escape plan as selling Peter's shadow. But why did you leave home? Did they... Wendy leaned in close and lowered her voice. Did they hurt you as a girl? Is that why you wanted to leave? Skipper gave her a look of shock and revulsion. No, I just wanted to be free. Like all of us. To not have rules and not brush my teeth. And hunt and fish and have fun all day. To never grow up. Ever. Right on, Skipper, Cubby cheered. That's my lost boy. But she's not, Wendy started to correct. Slightly smiled at her confusion. She is a lost boy, he said gently. 100%, like all of us. But that's the problem, Skipper said sorrowfully. I'm not exactly a boy. All right, Wendy said uncertainly. But if it's always been like this, why are you worried about it now? Skipper shrugged but looked a little desperate. Peter don't know. Not really. And Peter wants to kick slightly out because he wants new things. Peter's always talking about silly girls. Stupid girls. There are so many all over Neverland. And you in London. And I guess Tink says he likes you, but you're not like him, you know? Wendy considered this. True, Peter would never ask someone like Wendy to be a lost boy. He never did, in fact. What would happen if she suddenly popped up in his crew? I see your point, she said slowly. I think, however, we can get this all straightened out. No need to worry about it right now. We'll find Peter, retrieve his shadow, beat the pirates, have him make up a slightly, and then deal with you however we wish. Alright, but then we'll wait until things are a bit calmer, and we can see things with clearer head. Skipper nodded a little unhappily, but she had the look of a child who had just cried and is in this feeling calm and being mollified stage, tears having sniffed away. Wendy wondered if the girl had ever cried in her strange short life, at least in front of other people. But she couldn't stop from asking, from leaning in and whispering, "Did you ever find a little bothersome to be with wild boys at this time?" For an answer, Skipper opened her mouth and let out a terrified, loud burp. "Nice one, Skip," Slightly said, touching his hat and bowing to her. The rest of the Lost Boys cackled and laughed and cheered and tried to follow suit with considerably less success. "Well," Wendy said, trying not to be flustered or embarrassed, "I suppose that answers that." "Mermaid Lagoon is that way when the two of us are ready," Slightly said, pointing to the southeast. "How will you go?" "There's the path east and south beyond the Tunnel Springs, or you try to sail across the Bay of Skull Island." "Neither," Wendy said politely and perhaps just a little smugly. "We'll be taking the other." And with that, she neatly rose off her toes and a few feet into the air. The Lost Boys cheered, crowded, and guffawed at that. "Tink, you gave an outsider fairy dust?" Slightly called in a mock outrage. My, how far down the world we have come." Tinkerbell stuck her tongue out at him. Slightly made a very inappropriate, rude gesture back at Wendy had only seen thugs and urchins use. He was laughing. The fairy tossed her head derisively. Wendy wondered about their interactions. Tinkerbell had her own room in the Lost Boys' hideout, yet she seemed to treat them as meanly, or at least indifferently, as she did everyone else. For their part, the Lost Boys seemed not to care what she thought, or they simply accepted that it was just part of her touchy personality. Maybe it's just me, Wendy thought. Maybe the fairy was partially prickly and bad-tempered to everyone. But she doubted if Tinkerbell had ever physically attacked a Lost Boy the way she had assaulted her back clearing with the crystal creature. And she couldn't imagine Skipper acting that way Wendy had, stepping away and apologizing. The Lost Boy probably would have cracked Tinkerbell across the pate for such behavior. Luna yawned, turning herself around several times before sitting down next to Toodles. The little boy laughed and rubbed her face into his fur. The wolf looked wearily up at Wendy. "Are we really taking off again so soon? Just look at what a lovely little gaff of playmates we have here. I could use a nap too." "Can we keep her?" the twins begged immediately. "Just for now. She's so tired." "Nobody can keep her," Wendy said. "She's her own person." Yet, in so much as Luna was anyone, she was Wendy's. She was Wendy's dream dog, the perfect companion for adventures in Neverland. But was she a pet? Perhaps something created in Neverland was never really a Londoner's to begin with. And the wolf really was just a puppy. A very large, very tired-looking one at that. Tinkerbell said casually, Wendy said as casually as she could, relishing the use of the fairy's name and the intimacy it brought. "What do you think about Luna? Perhaps she's a little exhausted." Tinkerbell considered the wolf, and then nodded slowly. She pointed at the Lost Boys and shrugged. "What better place for a puppy to stay?" "All right, goodbye for now," Wendy said, dipping down to give Luna a big hug around her neck and shoulders. The wolf licked her all over, and the girls smiled and rose in the air. Tinkerbell followed, a few feet away, of course. At least, Wendy thought, we have just had our first completely neutral conversation. No anger, no recriminations, no insults, jingles. Certainly a step. She waved at the Lost Boys. "It was lovely meeting all of you. See you. Send us a signal as soon as who sorted stuff out with Peter, slightly called. The Lost Boys laughed and catered and yelled after them. Toodles and the twins broke into a wild, twirling circle dance. Skipper gave a shy wave with a half smile. Cubby howled like a wolf rather than the bear he thought he was. Luna joined in, a great doggy smile on her muzzle. It was a charming scene, and Wendy dearly hoped it would not be the last time she had seen her beloved wolf. That's the end of that chapter. See you later.